The teaching profession must be made attractive to attract more youth to take over the baton from us, the old guard across the continent. 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is around the corner. The International Men's Day before yesterday must be popularized moving forward. I know the Women Roundtable could have perhaps touched on this important day, the International Men's Day. I know the International Women's Day, it's more popular, but I'm saying we also need to popularize this one. Why? Men have to be appreciated for who they are, but also be requested to encourage other men, men like us, who believe in egalitarianism of both men and women. If we do, the challenge of gender-based violence might be reduced, because that violence on women and children oftentimes is done by men. They must be reminded while they're being appreciated to say, this has to stop. We wish you fruitful deliberations in this 10th EI Africa Regional Conference, and remind you that in Soweto there is a strait called Vilagasi. It will be happy to host you when you find time. In that strait of Vilagasi, there are two Nobel Prize winners, answering to Nelson Mandela and Mpilu Desmond Tutu. So it will not be in vain if you touch base with where these two legends have been in the past. Also, in our country, there is an apartheid museum, which is just a stone's throw from here. Find time to touch base with some of these important places in the history of our country. On behalf of the 5 teacher unions in South Africa, we welcome you. I'm referring here to PEU, I'm referring here to NATU, I'm referring here to NAPTOSA, South Afrikaanse Onderwyserunie, as well as SATU. This second regional conference in our country, this is the second. The first was in 2001 and was a launchpad of education for all. We as South Africa support and will advocate for the Go Public Fund education campaign into meeting sustainable development goals, as 2030 is just around the corner. And that said, once more, we welcome you and wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Mr. Magope Mafila. If I'm massacring the name, please forgive me. Excellency, I now welcome or invite His Worship, the Mayor of Johannesburg, Kebalo Gwamanda, to the podium. I understand His Worship is not around. So I proceed to the next on the agenda. A minute, I'll be back. Just being sure that I will not mention name of a person who is not yet present. So, the next to make a remark for us is Honorable Matomi Kapano Chilioni on behalf of Guantan Premier. Honorable, please, this is your podium. Please, a hands together for
Thank you so much, Program Director. These gadgets are a bit of a problem sometimes. I might be young, but I do believe, actually prefer pen and papers. Good morning, Tobela, Sanbonani, Molweni, Khoyamore, Abshin, Da. These are some of the languages, the greetings from South Africa. So as I begin, Program Director, let me begin by first and foremost greeting our President, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, our ever hardworking President, the Deputy Minister of Education, Dr. Regina Mahaule, the Executive Mayor of Johannesburg in absentia, Councillor Kabelo Kwamanda, President of Education International, Dr. David Edwards, and General Secretary Susan Hopgood. Or is the other way around? The other way around, my apology. Chairperson of the Education International Africa Region, Dr. Christian Adai Poku, and committee members, Vice President of EI for Africa Region, Mr. Mugwena Maluleka, and Education International General Secretary, Dr. Dennis Signolo, UNESCO, and other UN agencies, President of SATU, Mr. Mangope Mapila, all delegates representing countries from the African continent, including Palestine and Lebanon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to welcome all the delegates to the Education International 10th Africa Regional Conference. I'm extending this warm hand of welcome on behalf of our Premier, Mr. Panyaza Andrek Lusufi, our provincial government, and the people of the province of Gauteng. I hope many of you will have an opportunity to sample the many wonderful features of our province, Gauteng. This is the province where the Maropian cradle of humankind is to be found. This means all of you are coming back home, where you belong. So welcome home. I hope you'll also find some time to visit some of our province's cultural and historical sites, including, as listed by the President of SATU, Apartheid Museum, the Hector Peterson Monument, as well as the Vilakazi Street in Soweto. As you may already know, Hector Peterson is the first recorded victim of the Soweto uprising in June 1976, when the township learners rose against the imposition of the Afrikaans language, the poor standard of education for black people. As you can see, the quest for good quality and resilient education system which responds to human development as a whole is a historical imperative. Therefore, Program Director, I note that the theme of this conference is, open quote, standing together for resilient education system in times of crisis. The world is indeed gripped by a series of crises. Humanity itself is reeling from one form of crisis to another. The world has just emerged from global COVID-19 pandemic, the most devastating in living memory. Not only has the pandemic destroyed life and limb, but it has also immobilized society, decimating national economies, especially those of the developing South. As you will have noted, our country is still in the autumnal season, but the heat is scorching hot. and blistering like a typical summer. This is an indication of the changing weather patterns owing to climate change. These and many other global challenges which stare humanity in the face are real threats for which a resilient education system is imperative. Not only does the modern world need to produce minds attuned to science and technology to address these challenges, but also education system need to bridge the widening gap between the developed North and the developing South. A resilient education system need to produce a human-driven by high values and deep ideals of what we in South Africa call Ubuntu, a new vision of society which values peace among and between nations, an education system which prizes global fairness, justice, and equality in how the world works. The province of Gauteng, ladies and gentlemen, has identified 5 apex priorities which it has thrown itself into with zeal and gust. Education is one of these 5 apex priorities. Our province, the economic hub of our country, and indeed our country at large, continent rather at large, is entangled in binding constraints of historical nature, which impede socio-economic development. These are unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The latter is invariable, racialized, and feminized. As a province, we are hard at work to address these historical bequeath challenges. In this regard, the Gauteng province has implemented several educational programs, including but not limited to better infrastructure, ICT, and making education accessible to the poor, not only through literacy, but functional education, which apartheid had denied to the majority of our people. As I move to take my seat, I wish to remind the conference that along with transformation of the economy, education is one of the Gauteng provincial government's main priorities. Our provincial development vision continues to prioritize improving education outcomes in the province, including through harnessing ICT to provide smart schools and classrooms of the future, ensuring universalization of grade R, expanding the post-matric bursary scheme, enhancing schools of specialization, providing schools for children with special needs in townships, ensuring that the performance gap between learners from fee-paying and non-fee-paying school is narrowed. We believe this kind of intervention will influence positive education outcomes and will impact our vision of building a humane and inclusive society for all. I thank you and wish you all a successful Education International 10th Africa Regional Conference. Thank you.
It's now the turn of the President of EI Africa Region, Christian Adepoku. Your Excellency, incidentally, Christian Adepoku is the one standing here. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, EI President Susan Hopgood, the General Secretary of EI David Edwards, Honorables present, the Regional Director Dennis Signolo, invited guests, delegates, observers, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and privilege to stand before you today and to welcome you to our 10th Education International Africa Region Conference. This is a momentous occasion, a significant milestone in our collective pursuit of advancing quality public education for all and in defending our noble profession. Our ability to gather here today is a clear demonstration of our resilience in the midst of crisis. It is an opportunity for us to reflect and develop strategies for building and strengthening our education systems. Your Excellency, allow me to take this opportunity to thank our South African member organizations and the government of South Africa for hosting this beautiful conference here in Johannesburg. Colleagues, over the past 4 years since our last conference, we have faced numerous challenges that have tested the strength and significance of our profession. The unexpected onset of COVID-19 pandemic disrupted education systems worldwide, leading to indefinite closure of schools and displacement of educators from their familiar places. Amidst the loss of life and livelihood, here in our region, we have demonstrated remarkable resilience and solidarity. And on that, I say to everyone here, well done. Regrettably, Africa has experienced setbacks in the form of political instability, acts of terrorism, and the devastating effect of climate change. Furthermore, we have witnessed the abuse of human and trade union rights, particularly those of our members. Sadly, governments which are supposed to guarantee these rights are often the perpetrators of trade union violations, disregarding the standards and norms set by the International Labour Organization. Your Excellency, the Education 2030 promise encapsulates in SDG 4, the UN Global Education Goal remains a mirage. This is mainly due to the failure by governments to invest in education and in teachers. Many African countries are falling behind the recommended allocation of at least 20% of the national budget or 6% of GDP to education. Instead, the average budgetary allocation for education stands at a mere 3.8% of GDP and approximately 15% of national budgets. The Africa we want, articulated through the Africa Union Agenda 2063 and Continental Strategy for Africa, CISA, remains a pipeline dream. Our profession is in a precarious state. We are working under difficult circumstances. Sub-Saharan Africa has a shortage of over 16.5 million teachers. If this gap is not addressed urgently, Your Excellency, SDG 4 will be widely missed. Despite these setbacks, we stand united together to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to education and to our profession, standing together for resilient education systems. Our goal is to zealously guard and defend our profession and to hold government accountable for the provision of quality public education that our children so deserve. Let us use this conference to reflect on how we can build stronger and more independent education unions. Education unions that promote and protect every child's right to quality public education, the dignity and freedom of educators. Through solidarity, we can overcome the challenges that lie ahead and chart a course towards the Africa we envision. a continent where knowledge flourishes and where opportunities abound everywhere. Once more, I extend my warmest welcome to every one of you. May this conference be a catalyst for positive change, a platform for meaningful connections, and a beacon of hope for the future of education in Africa, for the Africa and the education we want. Thank you very much. On this note, another round of applause for Dr. Christian Adepoku. I have the honor, Your Excellency, to invite the President of Education International to the podium, Susan Hopgood.
His Excellency, President of the Republic of South Africa, distinguished colleagues, delegates and guests. It's really delightful to be here with you at this regional conference of our African region. I'm honoured to speak to you today and especially pleased that we are all here together in person for the first time in 4 years since the pandemic. Our purpose these few days is to engage in dialogue, to reflect and learn from each other, and to plan ways to encourage our members to play an active role in transforming education across Africa. That is a great ambition, and colleagues, I'm here to tell you that you are not alone, far from it. In fact, I bring you greetings from your federation and your fellow Education International members in 380 organisations in 180 countries and territories, together representing 32 million teachers and education workers from preschool to university. The issues facing you seem intensely local, but we know they are regional, and we need to understand that they are global as well. I am privileged to visit with our sisters and brothers in member organisations in many parts of the world. And I can tell you that we are all dealing with issues like inadequate investment in education, growing privatisation, infringement of the rights of teachers, the increasing casualisation of the profession, issues of pay, pension and social security, and existential threats to civil society, the public sector, to democracy, and because of climate change, threats to the very lands that we live on. The worst of COVID may be over, but a different and more chronic sort of emergency does linger. That is the crisis of the public sector, the ability of governments to maintain and advance the common good, and the capacity of people to hold their governments accountable. And it's certainly not news to you that the resources necessary for the public sector to meet the fundamental needs of the people are declining. We still don't know how many thousands of Libyans perished in the September floods, but we have been told by the World Meteorological Association that most of the loss of life could have been prevented if the nation had a functioning weather agency. I know this conference is strongly focused on building local and regional capacity, urging African governments to invest in education, educators, infrastructure, teaching and learning resources, in line with United Nations benchmarks of at least 6% of GDP and or 20% of the national budget. But, colleagues, the numbers remain especially discouraging when it comes to education. Globally, education system resources have fallen in 65% of low and middle income countries and 33% of upper, middle and high income countries since the start of the pandemic. Within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 4 was clearly set to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. Clearly set, but as we know, clearly not met. This challenge is especially great in the sub-Saharan Africa, where the equivalent of some $90 billion are needed to meet the SDG 4 funding gap. According to UNESCO, of the 44 million teachers that will be required by 2030, nearly 11 million are secondary education teachers that will be needed in sub-Saharan Africa alone. Millions of the most vulnerable children and young people don't have learning opportunities because of inadequate environments, untrained teachers, and a lack of educational resources. And girls are disproportionately affected. They have historically been the last in their families to be allowed access to schools, the first to be forced to leave schools in times of crisis, and the hardest to get back to school when that option is again available. One reason is debt. In July, the UN reported that some 3.3 billion people, almost half of humanity, live in countries that spend more on debt interest payments than on education or health. Across this continent, debt to GDP levels are higher than they've been in 20 years. And too often, as a condition of borrowing from global development authorities or national lenders, states are required to starve the public sector, including defunding education, health and other public services, and blocking teacher recruitment and salaries. As the EI Executive Board learned last week from an excellent report by our Regional Director, Denis Dignolo, many African countries suffer the impact of neoliberal policies and the conditionalities of the IMF and the World Bank. One example that stood out especially is that of Ghana, where $3 billion borrowed from the IMF was conditioned on not increasing either the number of teachers or teacher salaries. So where is the money? Again, colleagues, that will not be news to you. Billions of dollars in uncollected taxes prevent responsible investments in the public good and in economies that provide sustainable and broad-based growth. On a global scale, Action Aid tells us that the estimated annual revenue losses due to multinational corporation tax manipulation is about $600 billion in US dollars. Large corporations and wealthy individuals are leveraging the financial system for speculation and short-term profit-making while raising prices, hiding assets, and undermining state revenue collection. And even though education technology at scale remains largely untested, unregulated and unproven, school systems with no input from teachers have sent billions of dollars to technology companies. By the way, we are starting to get the full picture behind the Bridge, New Globe, so-called schools operating primarily in Africa, and how money has been spent from the World Bank, foundations associated with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, and US venture capitalists. The bank has funded these schools for a decade and now stands accused of covering up child sex abuse, conspiring with the company founders to hide this abuse, quash investigations and punish whistleblowers. I promise you that we will not let these children and this story be forgotten. There is no lack of resources to fund public education, but a lack of political will to make education the priority the world needs. We need to ensure that public financing is directed to the public good, ensuring that every student has a professionally trained, qualified and well-supported teacher in a quality learning environment. Last September, the United Nations faced these facts and elevated education as a top global priority, focused on critical shortages of qualified teachers and funding for education systems. And for the first time ever, a UN high-level panel examined the role of teachers and the supports we need to do our work, including addressing the global teacher shortage, elevating teacher professionalism, and the importance of funding. Colleagues, this was a breakthrough. Your message, our message about teachers is leading the global education dialogue. That they must be supported, valued and paid their worth, with workloads and working conditions that support mental and physical well-being, negotiated salaries competitive with those in comparable professions, and an end to insecure, precarious contract employment. The practice of employing unqualified staff to teach must end. I was pleased to be joined on the panel by the Republic of South Africa in the person of their Minister of Education, who stood fast with teachers in focusing the recommendations on that which matters most. That qualified teachers and education support personnel must be recognised as key partners for transforming education systems and be involved in policy planning through collaboration between governments and education unions. Mr. President, we are pleased you have joined us this morning and hope that you will become a champion of realising these recommendations here and across Africa through the African Union, noting that 2024 is the year of education. And perhaps you would even consider hosting an African launch here in South Africa early next year. Our goal is nothing short of a new social contract that connects the crisis in funding to the sustainable world we want to create. Colleagues, we talk about sustainability, as in the Sustainable Development Goals, with a certain degree of reverence, as more of a distant hope than a practical future. But sustainability is a bedrock principle of our trade unionism and, in turn, fundamental to democracy. There is a reason that dictators and autocrats target trade unionists for oppression and violence. It's because our movement is often the strongest, the best organised and most mobilised on behalf of the principles of democracy, including a vibrant public sector with public education as both a human right and a public good. The theme of this conference states it well: standing together for resilient education systems in times of crises. There is only one way to make inclusive quality education a universal human right and priority. There is only one way to get the public's resources for the public good. There is only one way forward to create a sustainable world. That way is to stand together, to mobilise our unions and our communities, to engage our governments and hold them accountable to fund the future through quality education. Colleagues, that is leadership. That is our challenge and our responsibility, but that is also our strength. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the climax of this afternoon's program. I have the singular honor to invite the Honorable Minister, Honorable Regina Mwale, the Deputy Minister of Basic Education, Republic of South Africa, to do us the next honors. Please, applause for her.
Program Director, thank you very much for this opportunity that is given to us. Greetings to the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, the Education International President, Ms. Susan Hopgood, the Education International's General Secretary, Dr. David Edwards, the Educational International African Region Chairperson, Dr. Christian Adibok, Education International Africa Director, Dr. Dennis Signolo, the Honorable MEC for Education in the province of Gauteng, Mr. Matumi Chilwane, the President of SATU, Mr. Mapila, the SATU General Secretary, Mr. Mugwena Maluleka, distinguished delegates across the continent and beyond, esteemed educators, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Sanbonani. It's with immense pride and a deep sense of responsibility that I stand before you today at the 10th Education International Africa Regional Conference on behalf of our Honorable Minister, Ms. Angelina Motshekga, who is attending the UNESCO General Conference. As we gather here today at the Sandton Convention Center, we are not just in a physical space, but at a crucial juncture in our collective journey towards the transforming and strengthening education system in the African continent. This year's theme, Standing Together for Resilient Education System in Times of Crisis, is timely and is a clarion call for unity and action. In an era marked by unpredictability and rapid change, the resilience of our education system is not merely a desirable attribute, but an absolute necessity. It's imperative that these systems are robust enough to maintain continuity of learning in the face of adversity, yet sufficiently agile to evolve in response to new challenges and opportunities. This balance between steadfastness and adaptability is crucial in ensuring that our education system can survive and thrive in times of crisis. In our deliberation, ladies and gentlemen, we must factor the educational aspirations that are articulated as guiding pillars of the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goal, SDG of 2030, as well as the African Union's Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016 to 2025. Of importance, these two frameworks, among others, are intended to reorient education system of the world to meet the knowledge, competencies, skills, innovation, and creativity for a changing world and promote the sustainable development for the nation of the world. I'm not here to give the keynote address. We have the head of state, the #1 citizen of our country, South Africa, who, yes, he needs introductions, but due to time, I may not, but he played a very instrumental role in the development of South Africa. He is a unionist in his own rights. He is a lawyer by profession. He is educated. He is everything. He is the first citizen of the Republic of South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, can we stand up and clap and welcome the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, to take the podium. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Let's be seated, please. It's a joy to be attending this conference, and I extend my greetings to the program director, who asked to be applauded. And I join those who applauded you with my special greetings to you, and Deputy Minister of Basic Education, Dr. Regina Mhaule, and the MEC of Education in this province where this conference is taking place, in Gauteng, Mr. Chilwane, and of course the President of Education International, Ms. Susan Hogwood, and the General Secretary, of course, Mr. David Edwards. And I also want to greet the Vice President of Education International, Mr. Magwena Maruleke. I also greet members and the leaders of the 5 trade unions in our own country here who are steeped in education. I extend my greetings to you all and live in the hope that the rallying call that we made when some of us were in the trade union movement, that we should have one industry, one union, one country, one federation, will one day come true. It's wonderful to have all the 5 strong trade unions in our country, but I live in hope that one day you will all unite and be one union. And I say so advisedly, President Hogwood, because as I stand here, I'm the employer to all those 5 unions and their members, and I really prefer to negotiate with one union. So talking to 5 unions who tend to differ from one issue to another does become challenging. And you know, they are so clever, these 5 unions. They play us off against each other. So you move from one caucus room to the next caucus room, and they are all sort of committed to the same objective, but they come from different angles. They are very, very clever. So I want to be clever as well against them and only talk to one union. So I live in hope. It's a real privilege to address this 10th Africa Regional Conference of Education International, particularly with its focus on shaping the future of education on our continent, as well as beyond. And the theme of your conference is Standing Together for Resilient Education Systems in Times of Crises. This resonates very well with the various crises that the people of the world have had to face in recent times. Of course, the one that stands out that has been very globular is COVID-19, but beyond that, there are quite a number of other regional crises. Maybe to be a bit historical, in our case as South Africa, we started off with having to unite and working together to face a crisis in education, which was given rise to by the evil apartheid system. There had to be unity, and the unity also was amongst some of the unions that got together to fight against a terrible education system. And they triumphed and succeeded in installing a much better education system that still needs to be taken out of a crisis situation that persists, largely because of our past. Government is spending quite a lot of money, and 6.6% of our GDP is spent on education, and overall almost 19% of our national expenditure is dedicated to education. So it is very high in terms of attention and expenditure of money in trying to resolve the current situation, the past, and the future. So dedication to education is quite strong in our government system. But we're also having to face other crises, and this is where your theme also rings so true. In many parts of the world, on our own continent, the political instability with which the chair referred to also requires resilience. As coups are taking place in various parts of our continent, that requires resilience. Right now, there are wars that are raging in Ukraine and Russia. There's also a terrible war that is raging in the Middle East that is in the process of destroying the lives of innocent people. So these are crises that the education system has to respond to, and crises that education system needs to be resilient in terms of addressing. So I'm rather glad that your deliberations today are going to be rooted on how you can all make the education system, all of us, can make it resilient to be able to withstand all these crises. Some of them have to do with climate change, some with wars, some with terrible incidents like fires and floods that disrupt people's lives. So you couldn't have chosen a better theme for your conference. And I do hope that your deliberations will come up with a number of strategies and actions that will enable the nations of the world, particularly on our own continent, Africa, to be able to navigate our way through all these. And the story of our own country is one of resilience, where communities have united in pursuit of a common cause. And indeed, we find that that tends to be the case in many parts of the world. This is a phenomenon that we saw during COVID, as COVID swept across the globe, and it brought a crisis of unprecedented scale. And as this crisis unfolded, we saw its impact not only on the livelihoods of the people of the world from a health point of view, an economic point of view, but we also saw it having a huge negative impact on education. But it was through the resilience of many of you who are in the teaching field, education field, who were able to steer us through this crisis. The pandemic itself hastened digital transformation in a number of countries around the world, and it altered the patterns of work as well as of education. It forced us to confront and appreciate the essential nature of education, also healthcare, revealing both the robustness and the fragility of our societies in the face of hardships. It was heartrending to see young children dying as a result of COVID, but it was also heartrending for parents who knew that the education of their children was paramount, but who feared to send their children to schools, knowing and fearing that they might be sending them to places where they might never return. So the pandemic was not just a crisis of health, but also of education. It underscored the vast disparities in our education systems right across the world, particularly with the digital divide becoming more and more pronounced. children in much better working economies were able to find it a lot easier to utilize digital means to educate themselves. But in many other countries around the world, this was a challenge. While some learners adapted swiftly to online learning, others, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, experienced great challenges. And our continent can bear great testimony to this. We saw how rural communities and students with disabilities were disproportionately affected by all this, while schooling disrupted inequalities in education were clearly exacerbated. Now, as we navigated these turbulent waters, the world was confronted with political upheavals as well as conflicts, as I said earlier. Now, these crises further strained what I would call our social fabric, affecting the livelihoods of countless of people in the world, denying many children their fundamental right to education. In these times of instability, it is even more critical for nations to stand united in pursuit of equal access to education for all. Education is a cornerstone upon which societies build their futures. Through education, we cultivate respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the principles of democracy. As the work of the United Nations High-Level Panel on the Teaching Profession demonstrates, the adaptation of education systems to a rapidly changing world is one of the most important tasks of the moment or of the day. This panel draws expertise from diverse stakeholders, experts, including ministers of education, labor representatives, teacher unions, civil society organizations, and it includes even our own minister, Angie Motshekga, who has participated actively in this. It underscores the importance of educators' voices in finding solutions to educational challenges. And we are very pleased that we have trade unions that are vocal, that are active in our own space here. Educators play a fundamental and irreplaceable role in shaping our societies, and their insights are invaluable in our quest for sustainable solutions. The other important area is curriculum reform. A curriculum reform that should respond to the changing world of work is another very important task. In South Africa, we are on the brink of a significant educational reform with the implementation of coding and robotics curriculum from grades R right at the beginning to grade 9. Now, this initiative is part of our broader strategy to integrate STEM subjects into our education system. By doing so, we aim to equip our learners with the digital skills that are necessary to thrive in a fast-paced world. Another important area for many countries on our continent would be to deal with another crisis that is age-old, that many of our countries were plunged into by force, I would say, colonialization. The impact of colonialization in many countries on our continent had a huge negative impact. And the whole process of decolonization of education has become increasingly important. Now, many learners and students have taken up the cudgels to ensure that we decolonize our education systems. And we and you all as educators need to join this. Now, your discussions at this conference focusing on tackling important issues such as racism, decolonizing education, and promoting democracy, and also promoting human rights, and especially trade union rights, could not be more timely. The project of decolonizing education in Africa is not just a matter of academic interest. In many ways, it is a pressing need, and others would say it is a life and death matter, because education being so important in the lives of people around the world, it is much more urgent that we should streamline our education system and cleanse it of the colonial type of ideology that infected our education system. We must challenge colonial theories and practices to build resilient education systems that are centered on African perspectives and experiences. This requires a shift from a Eurocentric worldview to embrace a more diverse and inclusive perspective. We must acknowledge and value the knowledge systems of all peoples and integrate them into our curricula and knowledge selection processes. The responsibility to nurture and defend the right to education extends to all parts of society. Now, labor movements, civil society organizations, and non-governmental organizations operating within the education sphere must work together and must collaborate to protect this critical space. Through such partnerships, we can prepare our learners, our students to be active, to be informed citizens in democratic societies. Now, the role of organizations such as Education International are vital. As advocates for quality education, your mission is to ensure inclusive, equitable learning opportunities for all, and not for some. In our own country, we lived in a country where education opportunities were open for some and not for all. We want to now address that legacy and bury it so that education opportunities and access are open to all South Africans. But the same applies. Same applies also on our continent. The disparities that exist in various parts of our continent as a result of poverty and inequality must also disappear. Education must be for all and not for some. What is also needed are safe and conducive environments where the rights of all learners are respected and upheld. By improving access to education, we can alleviate a number of other challenges and crises that beset many of our learners or that they have to face. Crises such as instability, crises such as criminal activities in the environments where they learn, crises such as poverty, and this is where we need to work together to empower marginalized communities, where we unblock their potential and contribute to the development of nations. As I conclude, I encourage you to explore the rich tapestry, not only of South Africa, but of our continent when it comes to its history and the culture of this very rich continent. The program director, or was it the MEC for education here in Gauteng, Madume Chilwane, he referred to Africa being the real cradle of humanity. And the tapestry that is here, and the history and the rich wealth that resides on this continent, particularly also when it comes to education and learning systems, is what should be lessons to all of us as we improve our own resilience in learning how to manage crises. Now, you have already been invited to explore this country. For those of you who are coming here for the first time, there's a lot of places where you can go and visit and enrich your own knowledge base about the struggles that were waged in this country and the various places that remind us. The president of SADC also referred to a place where we have 2 Nobel winners, where they used to live in Vilakazi Street. And in the end, it is how we should broaden knowledge and open up avenues where people can learn. Now, in the end, as we provide access to education, we can ensure that it becomes open to all our communities. And education in the end is not only about sitting in a classroom, it is much broader than that. And this is what this opportunity of this conference also gives you. So thank you once again for the invitation to address this gathering. Your commitment to advancing education, particularly in times of crisis, is crucial for the future of our continent and indeed in the world. I wish you all success in your deliberations, and I look forward to the outcomes of this conference. Yes, President Hawkwood, you have issued a private invitation to me, but you can't keep a secret, because having invited me to come and participate in the opening of your launch next year, I thought we would keep it between the two of us. Now you've made it public, and I think you want me to publicly say I will come. Yes, I will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, I humbly appeal that you do